Writing procedures for policies and regulations. Hi, I'm Bill Carmody, and I'm going to be speaking to you today about writing procedures for policies and regulations, which is different than other types of business writing. The first thing you want to think about when you're writing procedures for policies and regulations is to keep it simple. Use plain language instead of legalese. When you're writing procedures for policies and regulations, everyone who reads that policy or regulation needs to understand it. If you're using all of the whereas and thou shalt short and all the other things that the legalese that are outside in contract law, it might be great for a courtroom, but it's not helpful for actually implementing those policies and procedures. So keep it simple. Use plain language. Number two, keep it general. Policies cannot contemplate all possible situations. Oftentimes, when people get into the weeds on their policies and regulations, they're trying to predict every possible scenario. You can't do it. It's not possible. So instead, keep it general. Sort of make policies and trust that your people are going to use their brains because they're going to have an opportunity to see, like, how might this apply in this situation or that situation? If they don't understand the policy, they're not going to adhere to it. So make sure it's simple and general, like here's what we're looking for. Then make it relevant. Know who your intended audience is and their needs. So by thinking about all the different departments in your organization, if you're writing a policy or a regulation, you want to make sure that it's relevant to the people in which it's impacting. So by knowing the audience and knowing their needs, you can be very specific about what it is this policy does or does not do, and why this regulation is important and how it will help them. And then check for accuracy and compliance. You want to be correct before publishing. I know that sounds obvious, but I can't tell you when someone writes a policy or regulation, if they're not checking with their internal general counsel or outside legal department, they might be putting together a policy that's just flat out wrong. And then you have people following things the wrong way, and that actually makes it worse because you have to undo all of it later. So check for accuracy and compliance. And then ensure the policy can be enforced, because if it can't, why bother? If you're not enforcing a particular policy or regulation, you shouldn't even have it on your books, because without any type of enforcement, there's no way for you to actually ensure that this policy or regulation is adhered to. If you're not planning on enforcing it, then don't write it. And then clearly state who does what. So you want to specify the roles and the responsibilities. Who is the person responsible for this policy? What is the regulation? What are the infractions? And what are the responsibilities of any individual whose this policy or regulation impacts? Be very clear about that. So it becomes obvious when someone's reading the policy, hey, this affects me, or this regulation, it's important that I pay attention to this. And lastly, less is more. Get enough to the key points to get across and nothing more. See, the thing is that if you're trying to write a Bible or a giant policy procedure manual, no one's going to read it. So the thing about it is that what's the simplest way that you can write that process or policy or procedure and have someone internalize it? Because if they understand it, they're going to follow it. If they don't understand it, they're going to be out of compliance half the time, not even knowing that that's the case. So the more simple you can make it and the more to the point it can be, the more likely it is to be followed and the easier it will be for you to enforce.